Hey everybody, welcome to the Mountain Gamer. Today we're taking a look at some variants for Runebound 3rd edition. I got the game like 6 months ago. I had never played the 1st or 2nd edition, but right away we fell in love with the game. It's so epic and sprawling, and it's all about exploration, adventure, combat, and beefing up your hero for the big fight at the end. And yeah, we fell in love with it, and after I think 2 or 3 games we were like, I betcha there are a ton of variants for this thing. And lo and behold, if you go on Board Game Geek, it's thread upon thread of just changes and variants and, you know, people that want to try stuff. So today here, I'm just going to show you the ones that we cherry picked basically, and that we are using in our group. So let's get going. So I've put the variants on this little handy dandy card here. Now this looks like crap, but don't worry, your version will be much better, and I'll actually put that up on screen. Let's look at the first one here. So Prologue, the game has 3 extra rounds before the start of Act 1. Yeah, we always play with 3 rounds before the game actually begins. Just put him here, I like this guy. Yeah, it makes the game a tiny bit easier. It gives you just like a running start. You know, at least you can start exploring, start collecting some gold, maybe go get, you know, some of these things here, these goods. So we like it, and just thematically, it feels more like I'm just living my life as a traveler or as an explorer, you know, before this, this Margath dragon comes and starts, tearing up the place. I don't know. Thematically, it feels like a prologue. So we keep track of this with a die, just, round prologue 1, 2, 3, and then you start the actual game. Easy exploring. So these green cards only cost 1 action to explore. Now usually when you flip over an exploration gem, it would cost you 2, but for these it's only 1, and the reason for that is most of the purple ones and the orange ones, social and combat, they give you some sort of instant benefit, or just something instantly happens, and that's cool. You either fight a monster or you have a skill test to do. But when you get to these, it's like, okay, I have to travel all the way to Riverwatch. Well, in this case, it's right here, but I have to travel across the board, and I'm not even sure I want that. So you kind of, you've spent 2 actions, and you might not ever do this. So to encourage this exploration, and I mean, that's why I like Runebound. I actually like exploring and stuff. So to encourage that, we just took this thing where you dropped it to 1. And honestly, it doesn't break the game. You actually do explore more now. For assets, well, this is pretty simple. I mean, instead of having 3, we always have 4. So, it's just gonna look like this all across the board. What else here? Refresh assets. Yeah, this is a good one. When you are in a city, you can spend 1 action to cycle any number of these cards. I mean, there'd be 4 here, so you could, trash 1, 2, 3, or 4 of them for 1 action. So that just gives you more control over what you can buy. And the last one here, retreat during villain combat. So in the regular game, you can never retreat against, the final enemy. And I get that, but it makes for some very frustrating experiences where you've been playing for 2-3 hours, and then just because of like a bad, token toss, you can just lose the game. And thematically, I mean, if we can escape from any enemy, then we should be able to kind of escape from the boss. That being said, there should be a downside. So if you continue reading here, so doing so between combat rounds is now allowed. However, the villain immediately heals half the damage he took, rounded up. More so, at the end of every player turn where the villain was not attacked, he will heal 1 damage. So whether you're playing, 1 versus 1 or cooperatively, I mean, as soon as somebody escapes from a combat with the villain, he heals half his damage up, and at the end of every player's turn, he will heal 1. So yes, you are escaping and you will get a chance to maybe heal yourself, but I mean, the villain is also healing up a considerable amount. One note with this thing here is you'll have to use your judgment on certain scenarios. For example, the Margath scenario in Unbreakable Bonds. You do have to fight Margath as a party, so together. So there is no, not one player can escape that combat or retreat from that combat. You would have to retreat as a group. But again, I think it's thematic, I think it works, and just, use your judgment and everything should be fine. And on the other side here is the benefits of civilization. This is pretty neat. Spending the night. At the end of a round, a player may take a free action in certain locations. So, when everybody's turn is done, you check on where your figure actually is. And all depending on where they are, they can do something. So, if you finish your turn on a shrine, you could heal damage equal to the value of your highest skill. So, I don't know, for example, if I'm at 6 damage on 8, and I end my turn on a shrine, well, I could heal for 3. So, that'd be pretty good. So it might, encourage you to, instead of ending your turn here, well, you know what, I'll use my extra move and, if I can, to actually end my turn there to possibly heal myself. Second one here, if you end your turn on a stronghold, you can draw a skill card. Okay, so, you end your turn, you'll be like, okay, yeah, I want to swap this for this. Fine. So it's like a mini train action, I guess. And lastly here, if you end your turn in a town, you can draw one face-down asset. You may buy or discard it. You may also sell any assets you own. So in this particular case, if I ended my turn on a town, I could, draw an asset, and then I'd be like, oh, this is nice, actually. I would like to buy this, but can I? Well, yes, because, as it says here, you can also sell stuff. So I could sell this for 2. Okay, fun. Sell this for 2. Nice. And now I have 3, so I could buy this for $3. So you could actually do this. So this is just a way to sell and buy like out of turn and also out of a city. And if you keep reading here, it says when in a party. Now parties are in Unbreakable Bonds and it's when you're playing co-op. So if you're together in a party on a town space, each player draws an asset, making a pool from which any party member may choose. So in this case, if me and my wife are in the same town, we would, flip over 2 of them. And in this case, she would probably say, I'm taking this one for free. And then I'd be stuck with not being able to take that. But I could also say, I'm going to sell this for 3 just for fun. And that would be that. So this spending the night thing here is pretty cool. It just gives you, things to do at the end of your turn. And it encourages you to go on those civilized hexes. Lastly here, room teleports. Now this is not at the end of a turn. This is during your turn. It says, in a city, a player may spend 2 actions and 2 gold to teleport to any other city. So potentially you could, spend 2 actions and 2 gold to go from Riverwatch all the way up to Forge, just like that. We use this, if you use this once in a game, it's almost a miracle. Like you'll use it if you're in a pinch. But usually we find that we'd rather walk and keep the gold. But it's there, it can be used. So the second big variant we like to play with is roaming enemies. Basically what this does is we're going to have 5 enemies represented by these tokens or anything that you might have on hand. So these enemies will be moving across the board throughout the game, and sometimes they're going to engage you in combat if they end their turn on or close to you. So let's just look at these rules here. I'll put them up on screen. So for setup, unless specified otherwise, select 5 random basic enemies and set their cards aside. So what you can do is go through the enemy deck and get, 5 random enemies, and then you just shuffle this, and whenever you engage one of these, you would just take a card at random and engage that one. And if, he's defeated, then you'd shuffle it back in the deck. You could do it that way, or, you could even number these and say that this one is this one is that one, and so on, but that's a lot of trouble. The other way you could do it is just take one of those. For example, you could say that all of these, they are all the troll.
They have a cave troll.
Now what we usually do, and this is because I am a nerd, I have actually made special cards, special roaming enemies for different scenarios. So example, this one here would be for the Margath scenario. So this guy here is a nomadic drake. He's a roaming enemy, so he's gonna, there's 5 of them, 5 of them because of that. And you're always gonna be engaging these nomadic drakes. That's just me. You don't have to do that. You can just take these regular cards. So let's keep reading here. So at setup, you will be seeding these things on the board, and I've put them here. I like to seed them in order because I'll tell you about that later. But so yeah, you'll put one on Exile Peak, Echo Lake, Weeping Basin, Kernham Lake, and Tanglewood. Now for Tanglewood, you could put it here or here. It doesn't really matter. We usually put it, in the wilderness Now, after each round, so once every player is done, playing, you will be rolling a d3. Now, I've made this, I've just taken a regular die and did 2 faces have a 1, 2 faces have a 2, and 2 faces have a 3. But you could use a regular d6 and just say that 1, 2 is 1, 3, 4 is 2, and 5, 6 is 3. A d3. There you go. So what you'll do, you'll roll this, and this will determine how many spaces each of these dudes will be moving. And then what you'll do is roll a regular d6 for each of those to determine the direction in which they will be going. And if you look on the little graph here, it's pretty simple. So for this guy over here, let's do him. So for this guy over here, if I rolled a 6, well, he's going to move 2 spaces in the direction of 6. And on this here, it says 6 is basically northwest. So 6, and he would move 2. So 1, 2. That's it. And then you check for this guy. He's going to move 2. Oh, 6 again. Well, could be, but let's say something else. What are the odds? Okay. Okay, so 1. So he would move 2 in the direction of 1. So 1, 2. So you would do this for each of these guys. Now, there's some movement rules because, as it says here, enemies can pass through civilized hexes, but they cannot end on them. Halt their movement if necessary. So this means that, for example, if this guy here, if we were at 2 movement and he, actually rolled a 6, he could do 1, 2. He would go over this civilized hex. So 1, 2, and he would end there. That being said, if he had started his turn here with a 2 movement and a 6 as direction, 1, 2, no, you can't do that. So you would halt his movement. And then at the bottom here, it says, if you're unable to move at least 1 hex, head for the polar opposite. So for example, if we were at a 1, so he would move 1 hex in the direction of 6, which is that way, he can't do that. So the polar opposite would be this way. He would move there. That's it. Now, if we flip this over, it says if a hero is on an uncivilized hex and an enemy ends up on or adjacent to said hex, a combat immediately begins on the hero's hex. So he would actually come join you, and then you would fight the troll. Or, the nomadic drake. So then you would just fight him like a regular enemy with, some difference, some little differences in the rules here. So let's check that out very fast. So if the hero is defeated, the enemy token escapes 1 hex away. You can roll for direction. So let's say here. And then you would shuffle the enemy card back into the deck, if that's what you're doing. If the hero retreats, the hero becomes delayed. And then you would shuffle the enemy card back in the deck. This would actually stay on your hex. Now you might be thinking, okay, but when I start my turn and I take my action to get back up, won't I have to fight this guy? Well, no. You decide, when it's on your turn, you decide if you engage these guys or not. But at the end of everybody's turn, when it's their phase, if they ambush you, then you have to engage them in combat. So let's keep reading here. So the last option here is if the hero wins. Well, if the hero wins, you would discard the enemy card and the token. And then you would gain the card's listed reward as well as +1 gold. So in this case, gain 2 gold +1. You would not gain this as a trophy because these are, roaming enemies. It's special. It's something different. We don't take them as a trophy. And I mean, one more reason is I make these special cards. I don't want you to keep them as a trophy. I want them on the side of the board. So there you go. And at the bottom here, heroes may voluntarily attack a roaming enemy for a free action by entering its hex. That's what I was saying later. So on your turn, you could very well decide to go 1 action and then free action to engage them in combat. And then, just continue on your turn. We also play sometimes that whenever you kill one of these guys, they would spawn later. For example, well, I'm going to use this as a time tracker, but let's say we were here on the time track and at the end of the turn, we engage in a fight and I kill this guy. We would put him on the next available yellow space. So then later when the time tracker moves down to this particular round, we would spawn this guy by looking at this here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but in this case, 1, 2, 3. It's actually the third one here. So we would spawn him at 1, 2, 3, Weeping Basin. So then, boop, there he goes. So you could do it that way, that every time you kill one of these guys, they would go on to the next available gold or yellow space. That way it would ensure that there's always these guys on the board. That's another way to play it. And just before we go, I'd like to say that we always play with Beneath Terranoth, or as I like to call it, the Caves expansion. This is a deck of 20-something cards in which you can, explore the caves beneath Terranoth and have a lot of cool little adventures where you do skill tests and a whole lot of other things. And you can look for a link in the comments for that. So like I said in the beginning, those are just our favorite variants. They're the ones that we find work well for us. But there are a ton of them on Board Game Geek. A lot of them make the game longer with more rules. It's a bit more complicated, but it makes the game more epic. That being said, we find that a 3.5 hour game for 2 players is, well enough for us. So we've kept these, the ones that I've shown you. Overall, I think that the variants that we kept skew the game towards the easier side a little bit. I mean, for sure, those 3 prequel or prologue rounds make the game a little bit easier. Just having more assets to buy, stuff like that. But, as I said, you're going to play for 2-3 hours. You probably want to win. Having your butt kicked at the end, the last round just because of a crappy token chuck, that's kind of a bummer. So, yes, the roaming enemies does balance this out a tiny bit, but overall, I would say that we're on the easier side. So with that, I would invite you to try them out. Try and mix and match with any ones you see on Board Game Geek. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you on the next one. And if you want some more videos, YouTube thinks you might like the one on the left. I personally think you might enjoy the one on the right. And if you want to make sure to never miss any of my videos, I would ask you to click the middle button here to, of course, subscribe.
A man who would someday be king by his own hand.